Okay guys, Matt here today getting back into Hebrews, and today we get to finally talk about this Melchizedek character. Who in the world is he anyways? What's he represent? Where does he come from? What's all this talk? What's with the name? I mean, it's kind of a weird name, Melchizedek or Melchizedek. The author wanted to talk about him in chapter 5, but he couldn't because they were still drinking milk. He rebukes them. He says, guys, you should be teachers by now, and yet you're being tempted to be drugged back under this Levitical system, which is dead, which is gone, which was weak. It was useless. It could not save men. We'll see that in chapter 8. And he says, guys, Jesus is a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And today, finally, he gets to get into it. Let's pick back up in chapter 6 at the end there, just to pick back up in the flow. Let's do 17 here, and we'll read to Hebrews 7, verse 10. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, amen, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to that hope set before us. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain. He's getting their attention here. They love the temple worship, and he says, guys, we have a hope who's entered in there. Not one time a year, not on the Day of Atonement. No, Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever. Forever. Very important. After the order of Melchizedek. Okay, now we get to hear. For this Melchizedek, chapter 7, listen to the terms. Mark these down as you hear these. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest, king and a priest, king of Salem and priest of the Most High God, met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him. Very significant. And to him Abraham apportioned a tenth of everything. Very significant. He is first, by translation of his name, king of righteousness. Very significant. And then also king of Salem, that is king of peace. Perhaps a precursor to Jerusalem. Very significant. He is without father or mother or genealogy. Yeah, very significant. Having neither the beginning of days nor the end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he continues a priest forever. Resembling, we'll talk about that in a minute. Verse 4, see how great this man was to whom Abraham, the patriarch, the Jews are perked up now, their ears are perked up, gave a tenth of the spoils. Abraham was blessed by Melchizedek and tithed to Melchizedek. And those descendants of Levi who received the priestly office have a commandment in the law to take tithes from the people, that is, from their brothers, though these also are descendants from Abraham. But this man, who does not have his descendant from them, receives tithes from Abraham, and blessed him who had the promise. And it is without dispute that the inferior is blessed by the superior. Shocking. Shocking for the Jews to hear this. Abraham is inferior. Melchizedek is superior. In one case, tithes are received by mortal men, but in another case, by one of whom it testifies, he lives. He lives. Melchizedek, Jesus, lives. Never dies. And one might even say that Levi himself, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, for he was still in the loins of his ancestor when Melchizedek met him. Whew, okay. So, what's going on here? Well, let's go back to when Melchizedek met Abraham. Let's start there. It's what they call the slaughter of the kings. You can read about it in Genesis 14. It's very significant where this is placed, by the way. Genesis 14, because Abram turns into Abraham and gets the covenant in Genesis 15. Why is this so significant? We'll talk about that in a minute. But let's pick up here and what's going on. So there's this battle of the kings. The king of Sodom, I'll cut to the chase. You can read about it yourself in Genesis 14. The king of Sodom, king of Gomorrah, they fall. They lose. They're plundered basically. They lose a lot of their possessions and a lot of their people. Abram finds out. He goes after Lot. He goes after his kinsmen. He takes 318 of his men and he goes after them. And let's see what happens. And he divided his forces against them. Abraham did this. By night, he and his servants, and they defeated them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. Then he brought back all of the possessions and brought back his kinsman Lot with his possessions and the women and the people. Okay, now listen to this. After his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the valley of Shavah, that is the valley of the kings. And Melchizedek, Genesis 14, verse 18, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought him out bread and wine. He comes out of nowhere. He's only in Genesis 14, mentioned in Psalm 110 and a couple of times in Hebrews. He doesn't have any genealogy. He comes out with bread and wine. Let me read through this passage and we'll come back and then we'll go back to Hebrews 7. He was a priest of the God Most High, and he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And Abram gave a tenth of everything. And the king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the persons, but take the goods. And Abram said, No, I don't want the goods. I'm paraphrasing. God told me not to take the goods, lest people say, You made Abraham rich. Okay, so here's the deal. Here's what's going on. We have Melchizedek comes out of nowhere. And he comes bearing bread and wine. Who else came bearing bread and wine? Who else has bread and offers bread and wine? This is my body which will be broken for you. This is my blood which is shed for you, the cup of the new covenant. Right? And who blesses Abram? Why would Abram be blessed by Melchizedek unless Melchizedek was somebody extremely important? And Abram gave a tenth. Why would Abram, the father of our faith, tithe to Melchizedek? Tithing is a form of worship. Okay, so Melchizedek blesses Abram. Abram tithes to Melchizedek. Melchizedek is a king of righteousness and a king of peace. He doesn't have any genealogy, beginning of days. He's one resembling the Son of God. That doesn't mean he's just resembling. He also says that in Daniel 7:13, and I saw one who was like the Son of Man. Melchizedek is what we call a Christophany. Okay, you've heard the term Christophany before probably, and theophany. A theophany is God showing up. Generally, you could think of it in terms of, how about a pillar of fire? You know, for the Jews in the desert, a cloud. You know, on and on and on. You could think of it when Jesus was baptized. This is my Son in whom I love. You know, that's a theophany. A Christophany is an incarnate Christ showing up in the Old Testament, and they're all over. Theophanies and Christophanies are all over in the Old Testament. Why is this so significant? Well, it's significant because Jesus is a priest in the line of this Melchizedek. Okay, and this Melchizedek was a priest and a king. And nowhere in the history of the world has anyone ever been a priest and a king. It's impossible. You can't. Priests come from the line of Levi. Kings come from the line of Judah. But this is a new day. This is a new covenant. The old priests, they couldn't do it because they were sinful and they died. This new priest is a priest forever in the line of Melchizedek. And check this out. When you look at Genesis 14, think of this. Melchizedek shows up in Genesis 14, you could say the new covenant is hidden in Genesis 14 before Abraham gets the covenant, before the covenant is made with him. To your offspring I give this land, from the river of Egypt, and the great river, and the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites and the Kenizzites. It goes on and on and on. This is the covenant the Lord made with Abram. But before he made that covenant, Melchizedek pops up in Genesis 14. This doesn't surprise us, but it's awesome. It doesn't surprise us that the new covenant wasn't God's plan B. You know, it's not like God said, oh, didn't see that coming, let's do a new covenant. No, it doesn't surprise us. We know God's sovereign, but isn't it awesome to see it? To see it right before your eyes in Genesis 14. Here it is. Here's Melchizedek. Comes out of nowhere with bread and wine, blessing Abram. Abram tithing to him. Right? A king and a priest. You could never be a king and a priest. Aaron was a priest and a prophet. David was a king and a prophet. But no one could be a priest and a king unless something very special is going on, and it is. It's a picture of Jesus Christ. He shows up in the Old Covenant, in the Old Testament, in Genesis 14. Look at Genesis 18. There's a Christophany, right? Genesis 18. Let's look at that real quick. Abraham sees these visitors coming, right? And one of them says, I will surely return about this time next year. Genesis 18 verse 10. And Sarah your wife shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him, and she laughed to herself. But the visitor said, why did Sarah laugh? Well, how did the visitor know she was laughing? Because the visitor was Jesus. He was a Christophany. Jacob, who was he wrestling? A Christophany. And here it is. Melchizedek is a Christophany. He's an incarnate Christ showing up, preparing the way for this new covenant that was going to come all these years later before the old covenant was even made. That's amazing. That is an amazing God. So here it is. We see Melchizedek revealed. This is the meat of the word. This is what the author wanted to tell the Jews. You know, this is what he wanted to unveil for them, but they weren't ready. And now he's like, I got to tell you guys, because you're thinking of going back to a system that was never supposed to save you. And we have a high priest who is in the line of Melchizedek. See, he's a priest forever. He's a king and a priest. He's a priest and the offering. You know, he tore the veil. He entered the Holy of Holies. So now you, Hebrews, and you, Church 2011, can boldly approach the throne of grace. You don't have to go through a priest. In fact, if you belong to a religion that has a priest, you need to get out, because that is not for today. That's not of God. That's of man. That's of the flesh. That's a spirit of religion. We can boldly approach the throne of grace. Jesus is the high priest. If you're born again, you are a priestly nation, a holy nation set apart, a royal priesthood. 1 Peter, right? This is huge for the Jews. This is everything. And those with ears to hear will prove they truly belong to Christ. And those who don't will be that soil that grows thorns and thistles, will be just proving that they're on the broad way. So here it is. This is the dividing line. Right here, he lays it out. This is who Melchizedek is. Jesus is a priest after the order of Melchizedek. Are you in him or not? Are you going to follow the true high priest, Jesus Christ? Or are you going to go back? Because it's a difference between heaven and hell. Cursings and blessings. Salvation and condemnation. Do you know Jesus as your high priest? Do you know that he's a priest forever? He'll never die. He'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. He's never sinned. He's the perfect sacrifice. He's all you need. You don't need anything else. You don't need to eat a certain diet. You don't need to keep certain days. You don't need to do... It's faith in Jesus and Jesus alone. Do you have that, or are you counting on something else? If you're counting on anything else, repent of it. Ask Him to save you today. Don't count on anything else. We have a high priest who has entered the Holy of Holies. Follow Him and Him alone. Peace.